Welcome everyone to Charts Focus 1, where we teach you how to work hard and trade smart. Happy Sunday, everyone. All right, let's go straight into the markets. So SPY, right here on your screen is a weekly time frame. So the only reason why I'm giving you guys a weekly time frame first is that I want to make last week's price range very obvious. So last week we had a huge and obviously big price range. Last week's lows was at 403.78 and last week's highs was at 415.94. That's a huge difference in just one trading week. But the number one reason why I like this really large price range is that the price was allowed to come back down and pull back. And to where did I want to see the price pulling back to? The weekly 10 SMA. And thankfully, at the last 2 days of last week, we actually retested the area of the weekly 10 SMA, and then we bounced really hard to the point where we even overtook last week's highs, which was at 415.72. And so this is really good because this tells us that bulls are ready to defend even on the weekly time frame. And even if we do pull back into any of the momentum SMAs, my 10 or the 21, they are ready to make the price bounce and have a very nice big run up to the upside as we saw last week. Now, that's good and all. But what am I really aiming for here? This number right here. So if you guys remember, in the previous couple of weeks, I've been talking about this previous high pivot point at 416.72. Well, now that we're really close to this number, since we closed at 415.93 last week, I'm looking to see if we retest this number this week and even overtake this number. Because remember, since this number was printed in the markets in late January, we haven't come back to this area at all, not even once, until now. So if you're able to actually see the bulls kind of coming together this week and being able to overtake this most recent previous highest pivot point, we are most ready to go to this target number of 420. That's right, 420. Now, this is a great number and all, but again, there are a lot of opportunities to play SPY here between last week's close or even the previous high pivot point all the way up to 420. So again, one of those few opportunities could be swinging at the retest of 415.50 all the way up to another retest at 420 and then selling. Because at 420, I would assume that there will be a lot of supply or sellers ready to push the price lower. And that's completely fine because again, I am expecting some pullbacks back into, the weekly 10 SMA or even the weekly 21 SMA. As long as we make a higher high compared to the most previous high pivot point, which is again 416.72, okay? We're all good, right? That's all we need to see. We need to see a higher high to solidify a textbook uptrend, okay? And again, we have a very chaotic week, so it would be, no surprise to us if we see a retest at 420 by the end of this week. And again, we had a crazy price range last week, so it would make sense, or it wouldn't be a surprise at all if we get another crazy price range week this very week. All right, now if you go on the daily time frame, so last Thursday and last Friday, we got a very nice bullish candlestick. How do we know this? Well, we have a very long rectangle here, right? And that's completely filled in. So these are what we call textbook bullish candlesticks. And just before Thursday, which was Wednesday and Tuesday, we got very bearish candlesticks. So this was a very large pivot and a turnaround for the market as the momentum switched from being very bearish to be very, very bullish. And I love how we snap back like this because, again, when we create these momentum snapbacks, we get these V-shaped recoveries. And that tends to create a very long-term and even short-term momentum to the upside. All right, so if we're able to retest 420 by the end of this week, I wouldn't be surprised if we're able to retest the next major level of resistance at 427.50 and even over 430. All right, so tomorrow I would expect to see another third green candlestick, whether it be a hammer candlestick or whether it be a doji. All I want to see is a nice bullish day where we get a nice green candlestick or with a very nice long bottom wick if we decide to pull back and possibly retest at 413, which has been a huge level of resistance on the intraday time frames and even on the daily here as seen in this specific area. All right, let's take a look at QQQ. So last week, I even gave you guys a specific example of what I wanted to see. And guess what? That's exactly what we got. And as seen by these three arrows here that I drew for you guys last week, we got our official third retest at 321.50. And on Friday, we were able to retest it and even bump higher and break over 321.50, which solidifies our third retest on any level could result in a breakout theory, right? And that's kind of a general theory or rule in the markets where we get a third retest tends to lead us to a breakout, whether it be a support or resistance. And in this case, we got our third retest on this 321.50 major resistance level, and we got that nice breakout as we closed over this level at 322.56. Now, is there a possibility of us retesting this level and coming back down and then bouncing and turning it into a new level of support? Of course, right? And we want to see that because that confirms that the Qs are definitely in an uptrend and we're able to break over this 321.50, creating new higher highs and new higher lows. And so even just last Friday on this candlestick, we made a higher high by making a high of 322.65 compared to the most recent previous high pivot point right over here at 321.63. So exactly what I did with SPY, right? We're looking at the most previous high pivot point, and then we're looking at last Friday's pivot point or high pivot point. And so obviously QQQs, if you take a look at the daily here and then at SPY, you can clearly tell which one is a lot stronger, right? Because QQQs have already made a new high point compared to the previous most high pivot point here at 416.72, right? And so QQQ made a higher pivot point compared to 321.63, while SPY has not done that just yet, but it is gearing for to outtake this 416.72 number. All right, so make sure you guys are always checking in on your higher lows, higher highs, or whatever it may be, lower highs or lower lows. But remember, we are in an uptrend, so we want to be focusing on the higher highs and higher lows. Okay, so QQQ, I'm going to expect to see at least 330 by mid-May or even by the end of this week. Who knows, right? Because the QQQs have been seeing a huge inflow of demand. How do we know this? Just take a look at the volume bars here. All right, we're getting a lot of big jumps in the green volume bars, which means buying is coming in. And if I actually bring out the average volume here, we're starting to see the volume starting to actually curl up higher here. All right, so if I make it orange here for you guys to make it a bit more visible here, we're about to see an uptick in the average volume, and that's going to be good for us because especially if we want to see continued buying, that usually means the price will go up higher. So again, I'm expecting to see the Qs at 330s by either mid-May here or by the end of this week. Who knows? All right, anything can happen in this market. We could get very, very large bullish candlesticks as we saw back in mid-March when we saw the Qs breaking out faster than the overall markets, like this specific candlestick where we saw almost an 8-point range in one day. All right, that is huge. And if we're able to have that same 8-point day range, we can basically retest 330 based on last Friday's close at 322. All right, so anything is possible in this current market right now is what I'm trying to say. All right, so let's take a look at our first name, MU. Now I'm going to go over this very, very quickly. All right, so MU is looking fantastic from a weekly time frame perspective because we have this very, very large base that has been forming since last June of last year. All right, that's a huge base. And we're getting that classic higher lows as well, which tells me that buyers have been accumulating this name for months on end, right? All the way up to this new year. And again, as we're making higher lows, that means that buyers are defending the price from heading even lower. And that's the reason why we get this pattern, right? And that's how we know that buyers are accumulating, right? They're adding on to their long-term positions. And so now that we have finally reached the 64.50 resistance level that I've been touting for months on end here, it looks like we're ready for a nice full-blown breakout to the upside and ultimately reach 70 to 72, or at least generally in the 70s. And here's the thing, right? Here's the catch here. If we do break over 64.50 as we attempted last week on Friday, we will need to retest another major level of resistance at 65.50, right? And this level here was used as a level of heavy support back in mid-May to late May and ultimately in early June when we saw a big break to the downside at 65.50. What does this mean? Well, that means that sellers are heavily resting at the 65.50 area. And so if buyers have enough volume, and it looks like we do, as we saw this huge increase in volume the past couple of weeks, we should be able to squeeze out any sellers at 65.50 that are still remaining and who have been trying to push the price lower as we've been basing here, and ultimately create a nice short squeeze like move for us to ultimately retest the 70s. All right, so again, this level is huge after we break over 64.50. So make sure you guys are watching the 65.50 level on the weekly time frame. Also, I want to add in that we have this nice bullish engulfing candlestick here, right? So this is a huge, also it can be called a hammer candlestick if you guys want. Some people like to be a little bit playful and say that it's a sword candlestick, a nice bullish sword candlestick, because it has a very nice handle, which is the bottom wick here, and a huge blade, which is the entire full body candlestick here. So whatever you guys want to call it, at the end of the day, it's a nice engulfing candlestick where it completely encompasses the previous week's candlestick. And I love the fact that the 10 and the 21 SMA has been retested, just like on SPY on the weekly time frame where we retested the weekly 10 SMA. But in this case, we have retested the 10 and the 21, and we bounced heavily away from it, which tells me that buyers are readily here and available to defend any type of selling that goes on in this name. Right? So on the daily time frame, it looks like we're ready for a nice pullback at 64.50. So I wouldn't be surprised if we get a nice rejection tomorrow at 64.50, and maybe even retest 63.50 or even 63, bounce, and then have another attempt at 64.50. But again, remember what I said before on the Qs. We have the 3-touch rule, right? So if we retest 64.50 as we did last week, which was our third retest in the most recent time here, just on this data here, we can see a breakout tomorrow over 64.50 and possibly even go up to 65.50 before seeing any major rejection and a pullback on the daily time frame here before we see a retest at the 10 SMA as the momentum SMAs, my 10 and 21, start to catch up to the price. And ultimately, we want to see a catch up with SMAs here because they support the price up higher. All right, so our next name is Google. So I'm going to give you guys the entry point live here. Okay, so we want to see Google long over 108.10. So why do we want to see a entry point over 108? Well, first of all, we have this nice flag going on here. All right, so we've been seeing very, very tight consolidation in Google after a nice monstrous run off on the news that Google was making a more efficient and more cost efficient semiconductor chip, right? And that goes directly against NVIDIA, which is kind of the mother of chips, semiconductor chips. And so if Google really does have a chip that can compete with NVIDIA, then that is huge. And that's the reason why we saw this huge run up and also all that AI hype as well back in mid-March. So Google still has that resting over its head, right? The hype of AI and that semiconductor chip. And I should probably go read more into what they're actually developing, but that's the news. That was the headline news. So Google here, we have a nice retest of the 10 and the 21 SMA last Friday. And we're able to retest 106 as well. And what's really interesting here is that we ended up with a nice hammer candlestick. However, this hammer is also an inside candlestick compared to last Thursday's candlestick, right? We are seeing the highs and the lows of Friday, which is inside the highs and lows of Thursday, right? So in this case, this tells us that we're ready to continue higher. How do I know it's higher? Well, first of all, we've been moving in an uptrend, right? A textbook uptrend. How do I know it's a textbook uptrend? Higher highs, higher lows. Very, very simple. But now, after the higher highs and higher lows trend is over, we've been consolidating, which is typical after a nice, brief, impulsive uptrend. And so when we get that consolidation, we'll ultimately get a nice breakout for a continuation to the upside. And I love the fact that on Friday, we got that confirmation or signal that we can see a potential continuation to the upside because an inside day candlestick tells you that there can be a continuation of the current trend. And that current trend or general trend here is an uptrend. All right. So all we need to do is break out of this deadlock of a consolidation. And that is going to happen once we're able to break over 108. Now, mind you, we have lower highs right now, right? So we have lower highs here starting from 109.17 and then right over here at 108.94 and then one right here on Thursday at 108.37. So if I make a trend line here that connects all these pivot points here, we have also a nice descending level of resistance that we need to get out of. So if we want to see a nice confirmation entry point, so what that means is that if we're able to break over 108 and then also break over this descending level of resistance, then I would say you should look for a long entry point over 108.50 because at 108.50, I would assume just based on my cursor here, my mouse cursor, we will be over this descending level of resistance. All right, so that's how I deconstruct my entry points here. All right, so we get an early entry and we also get a confirmation entry. Excuse my voice here, guys. I've been talking a lot this week. Now, for Google, I'm going to expect at least a retest of 110, 111, 112, and ultimately a retest of 113, which is a nice weekly level that you guys can see right over here and even all the way back over here when it was being used as a heavy level of support. All right. So on the weekly time frame, I'm looking for a nice clear run up to 113. Okay, so our third name here is INMD or In Mode Limited. So this one, I'm not going to look at the weekly time frame here because there's not much to see other than this very, very nice consolidation base, which is we have been making higher highs and higher lows, right? If you guys can see that. Higher highs, higher lows. Very simple, right? We're making a nice ascending channel here, which is bearish, obviously. But I want to make a bullish case here for you all. So we go on the daily time frame. So in the daily time frame here, we have a very classic bull flag. How do we know this? Well, we have this impulsive run up, which creates our flagpole. And then we have our descending level of resistance and then our flat bottom here, which makes our flag. And we add those two up, we get a bullish flag, all right? And so we have a flag pull again, and then a flag, and that ultimately creates a bull flag. And in this scenario here, okay, so in this scenario, we're seeing a very textbook consolidation right before earnings. However, I do have to let you guys know that INMD here actually reported preliminary results back in mid-April. So exactly on April 11th, after hours, or actually, I believe it was April 12th, pre-market hours, and we saw a nice big jump in the share price. I have to get that information accurate, but it doesn't really matter. All we need to know is that this company had reported earnings way before the actual earnings date. So that kind of makes you wonder, what are they going to really say during earnings? And could that really affect the company's share price and actually have a very, very large reaction to either side, to the upside or to the downside? We don't know that. But all we know is that they have reported preliminary results. So we know what the numbers are, right? Obviously, they're going to give us more numbers on the actual earnings day, which is on Tuesday of this week, pre-market. And ultimately, what I'm going to be looking for is the guidance, right? The guidance has been very, very important this earnings season. And so obviously, INMD has been, proving to be a very, very hard company that has been really just not affected by the market's movement or even the economy, right? We've seen multiple reports from the company itself that they've been doing really well, even after the COVID recession. So INMD, again, this one, I really have to focus on this one this week. This is a very, very textbook consolidation. If we're able to break over, okay, so let me give you guys the actual entry point. All right, if we're able to break over, I would say Friday's high, so simply 37.50. How about that? Right, so 37.50. We should be able to get a nice breakout out of this descending level of resistance, which is a part of the flag, and ultimately retest a major level of resistance, a previous level of resistance at 38.50, or if you guys just simply want to round up again, 39. All right, very, very simple. That's kind of arbitrary. If you guys want to do that, that's fine with me, as long as you guys are focusing on the whole number levels. And then ultimately, we want to see a breakout over that number and have a nice retest at the 40s. Okay, so INMD, I am very bullish on this one, as we saw when they reported preliminary earnings results, and we had a nice gap up. And then on the actual day, on the reaction to that news, we saw a very nice bullish run up as well. Okay, so INMD, watch out. I'm most likely going to watch this one after earnings. So when pre-market earnings are done and right after market open, I'll watch this one very, very closely. So make sure you guys are watching this one with me on Tuesday morning after market open. Okay, so our fourth name, last but not least, we have AMD. So before I even talk about the technicals here, AMD also has earnings on Tuesday, just like INMD, but this one is during after hours market. So there is a chance to trade this, either a swing from Monday to Tuesday, or you can day trade this on Tuesday, or even just tomorrow, right? But I would recommend Tuesday when investors and traders are getting active, ready to go into earnings, right? So AMD, okay, with that in mind, right, we have a nice looking flag, right? I have mentioned this multiple times in the Discord as well, just last week and the last 2 weeks, right? And again, last week we had this name because of this flag. However, we failed this flag just for a brief moment though, because last Thursday, what did we get in the overall markets? A huge bounce. And so we saw bulls coming straight back into this nice chart pattern, this bullish flag chart pattern, or if you guys want to kind of isolate it here, a nice falling wedge, which is also, again, a bullish chart pattern. And ultimately, we're able to retake the daily 50 and the daily 10 SMA. So again, the daily 50 is my dark blue line here, and then my daily 10 is my red line here. And as we did that on Friday, we actually closed over $89, which has been a huge headache for me for this name since last week. And so if we're able to come back down to retest 89, we can bounce at $89. However, if you guys want a confirmation entry point, okay, just like we did with, I believe it was Google, or actually, yeah, it was for Google, all right? We should be looking for a long entry over 90.10. And why 90 over 90? Well, for the same reasons, right? Just like with Google, we want to be able to make sure that the price is staying over the falling wedge's descending level of resistance. This is where we've seen major pullbacks, right? I mean, I don't need to tell you guys this to convince you guys. You guys can just look at the chart. We've been seeing a retest of this descending level of resistance, and we get an immediate rejection and then immediate pullback. So if we're able to stay above this descending level of resistance somewhere around $90, that will be your confirmation entry point, and ultimately we'll see a retest of 92, which is our next huge level of supply or area of supply on the intraday timeframes and on the daily timeframe. And that will also include a retest of the daily 21 SMA right over here as my light blue line. So obviously, I want us to get out of this huge consolidation here, this falling wedge, and ultimately I want to see a nice big run up to at least 94 to 96. But again, we have earnings on Tuesday after hours. So what does that mean? Well, my entire plan here to be bullish on AMD can be completely dismantled by after hours price action on Tuesday. So make sure you guys keep that in mind before you guys get into AMD either on Monday or Tuesday. Because again, people will want to, really, they will want to try to gamble on AMD here on Tuesday. So again, I will highly do not recommend and not recommend at all to gamble on earnings, all right? But if you guys do, good luck. That's in your hands, not mine. I gave you guys a fair warning, okay? But again, if AMD has a great reaction to the upside, that's great. Because again, what is my bias here? To the long side, right? So if the earnings was great and we get a nice earnings reaction to the upside, I'm all for it. Because AMD, I'm looking for triple digits per share once more. And that means my maximum target for AMD will be $100 per share. All right, and that is it for this video. If this technical analysis video was insightful, make sure you guys leave a like down below. And if you aren't subscribed yet, make sure you hit that subscribe button and that sign that looks like a bell, because that is a notification bell. And that will let you guys know whether I am live or when I upload a new video like this. Good luck, and I'll see you all tomorrow in the live stream.